In the summer of 1944, the Allied High Command in Europe was a powder keg of egos. At the top was General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Supreme Commander. Ike was a diplomat in a uniform, a man whose primary job was keeping the Americans, the British, and the French from tearing each other apart. And then there was George S. Patton. Patton was everything Eisenhower was not. He was loud, he was profane, he was superstitious, and he was dangerously aggressive. He believed in reincarnation. He carried ivory-handled revolvers like a cowboy, and he had a habit of saying the wrong thing to the press at exactly the wrong time. By the time the Allies broke out of Normandy, Patton was already on thin ice. He had been sidelined for months after the infamous slapping incidents in Sicily, where he had physically struck 2 soldiers suffering from shell shock. The British hated him. The press wanted his head. Eisenhower's own advisors told him that Patton was a liability that could destroy the Allied coalition. And yet, when the maps were rolled out and the orders were written, Eisenhower did the one thing no one expected. He took the leash off the lion. He didn't just keep Patton, he gave him the Third Army and told him to drive until he ran out of gas. Why did the cautious, political Eisenhower gamble the entire war on a man he couldn't control? To understand that, you have to understand the cold, mathematical reality of the Western Front. Eisenhower was a master of the big picture. He knew that the German Wehrmacht was a master of the defensive. If the Allies moved too slowly, the Germans would dig in, blow the bridges, and turn France into a repeat of the static, bloody trench warfare of World War I. Ike needed a breaker. He needed someone who didn't care about supply lines, didn't care about his flanks, and didn't care about proper military procedure. Patton was that man. While other generals, like the cautious Omar Bradley or the methodical Bernard Montgomery, moved in stages, Patton moved in a constant state of violence. He understood pursuit. He knew that as long as he kept his tanks moving, the German command structure would remain in a state of perpetual panic. Eisenhower famously said of Patton, "George is a problem child, but he is a great fighter." Ike realized that while Patton was a nightmare in a press conference, he was a miracle on the battlefield. Eisenhower was willing to absorb the political heat from Washington and London as long as Patton kept capturing thousands of square miles of French territory every single day. There was also a brilliant element of deception in Eisenhower's decision. Before D-Day, Eisenhower had used Patton as a ghost. He placed Patton in charge of a fake army group in England, complete with inflatable tanks and dummy radio traffic to trick the Germans into thinking the invasion would land. At the Pas-de-Calais, the German High Command was obsessed with Patton. They considered him the Allies' only great general. They were so afraid of him that they kept entire divisions in reserve, waiting for him to appear. Eisenhower knew this. By keeping Patton in the wings and then suddenly unleashing him during the breakout from Normandy, Ike used Patton as a psychological sledgehammer. When the German generals heard that Patton's Third Army was on their flank, they didn't just retreat, they panicked. But this came at a cost. Patton's Third Army moved so fast that they literally outran their own supplies. By late August 1944, Patton was begging for more fuel, claiming he could be in Berlin by Christmas. Eisenhower, looking at the entire front, made the heart-wrenching decision to divert that fuel to Montgomery in the north. This led to the most famous shouting match in military history. Patton accused Eisenhower of being the best general the British have. But even after being insulted to his face, Ike didn't fire him. He knew he still needed Patton for what was coming next. The ultimate justification for Eisenhower's patience came in December 1944 during the Battle of the Bulge. The Germans had launched a massive surprise counteroffensive in the Ardennes, trapping the 101st Airborne at Bastogne. The Allied lines were buckling. Eisenhower called a meeting of his top generals in a cold barracks in Verdun. He asked the room, "Who can counterattack the German flank?" Most generals said it would take a week, maybe two, to pivot their divisions in the middle of a blizzard. Patton stood up, a cigar in his hand, and said, "I can do it in 3 days with 3 divisions." The room went silent. Some thought he was grandstanding. Others thought he was insane. But Eisenhower looked Patton in the eye and said, "Every time I get a new headache, I look at you, and you've got another one for me. But go ahead, George." What followed was one of the greatest logistical and tactical feats in the history of warfare. Patton pivoted an entire army 90 degrees in the middle of a winter storm and slammed into the German flank exactly when he said he would. He saved the 101st Airborne and broke the back of the German offensive. In that moment, Eisenhower's decision was vindicated. He had put up with the slapping scandals, the insults, and the arrogance, because he knew that when the world was on the line, George S. Patton was the only man who could do the impossible. History often remembers Eisenhower and Patton as rivals, and in many ways, they were. Patton died shortly after the war in a car accident, still bitter that he hadn't been allowed to conquer Berlin. Eisenhower went on to become President of the United States. His reputation as a statesman solidified forever. But the truth is, the liberation of Europe was only possible because these two men worked together. Eisenhower was the ice, the calm, cold, calculating mind that held the world together. Patton was the fire, the burning, destructive force that cleared the path forward. Eisenhower allowed Patton to continue his offensive because he knew that a war cannot be won by diplomats alone. Sometimes, you have to let the problem child off the leash to finish the job.